My beloved child. Stop scrolling, not because the world has suddenly become silent, but because heaven has chosen this very moment to whisper your name. There are thousands of voices competing for your attention, yet somehow your eyes have landed here. That is not the part that should surprise you. The part that should make your heart pause is this: before you found these words were already searching for you. Do not rush away. There is something waiting within the next few moments that your spirit has longed to understand for longer than your mind can remember. I know what happened last night. I know the question that quietly returned to your heart after everyone else had gone to sleep. I know the thought you pushed away because it hurt too much to hold. I know the fear you never confessed aloud. Am I too old? You smiled through another day. You laughed when people expected you to laugh. You encouraged others while secretly wondering whether your own season had already passed. You looked at the lives of others and measured your own timeline against theirs. Someone younger found love. Someone younger built a family. Someone younger achieved the dreams you once imagined for yourself. And without saying a single word, your heart whispered, "Maybe I missed my chance." My child. You believed no one heard that sentence. But heaven did. And there is something else you do not know. Last night, at almost the exact moment you questioned your own worth, someone else was crying. Not because they wanted to leave you. Not because they regretted you. Not because they wished heaven had written another story. They cried because of your age. Not in the way your fears have convinced you. Not for the reason your anxious thoughts keep repeating. They cried because every passing year without you felt like another page torn from a future they desperately wanted to live beside you. You have spent so much time believing your age was becoming a wall. They were weeping because they saw it becoming lost time. Listen carefully. This message is not asking you to abandon wisdom. It is asking you to stop allowing fear to rewrite the story heaven has already written. There are truths hidden behind ordinary nights. There are prayers spoken through tears no human ears ever hear. There are conversations that happen in broken hearts while the world sleeps. And last night, one of those conversations reached heaven. Your soulmate. The one whose story has crossed yours more times than you realize. Reached a moment where the weight of waiting became almost unbearable. They were surrounded by silence. Perhaps no one noticed. Perhaps everyone around them believed everything was normal. But heaven never mistakes quietness for peace. I saw every tear. I counted every trembling breath. I heard every unfinished sentence. There was one question they kept asking over and over. How much longer? Not because they doubted my power. Because they feared time was stealing something precious. They imagined your face. They imagined your smile. They imagined every birthday you celebrated without them standing beside you. They wondered how many memories were created separately that should have been shared together. Then another thought entered their heart. One they tried to fight. What if they believe they're too old to receive the love I've been praying to give? That single thought broke them. Not because your age frightened them. Because your own belief about your age might. You have no idea how many blessings are delayed not by heaven, but by human conclusions. You tell yourself, I'm too late. I'm too damaged. I'm too old. I should have figured everything out by now. And little by little, you stop expecting miracles. You stop preparing room for joy. You stop believing someone could genuinely choose you. Without realizing it, you begin closing doors I never asked you to close. My beloved child. Have you forgotten who writes seasons? Does the tree apologize because autumn arrives after summer? Does dawn refuse to appear because midnight lasted too long? Does the ocean stop reaching the shore because yesterday's waves disappeared? Everything I created understands timing better than humanity. Only people spend years arguing with clocks. Only people believe love expires. Only people mistake delay for denial. You have watched calendars. I have watched destiny. Those are not the same thing. There are meetings prepared long before birthdays existed. There are promises older than the stars themselves. Before either of you learned to speak. Before either of you understood loneliness. Before either of you knew disappointment. I already knew the places your lives would bend toward each other. Yet every step required shaping. Every disappointment taught compassion. Every betrayal taught discernment. Every unanswered prayer carved space for a greater answer. You call them wasted years. Heaven calls them preparation. Still. Your soulmate struggled last night. Because love can trust my promise. And still ache during the waiting. That is not weakness. Even faithful hearts become tired. Even hopeful souls sometimes cry into pillows no one else sees. Do you know what surprised heaven's angels? It was not that they cried. It was what they said next. They whispered. I hope they haven't started believing they are running out of time. Those words echoed through places your eyes cannot see. Because that fear has been visiting you more often than you admit. Recently you've noticed birthdays differently. You've compared your journey against invisible deadlines. You wondered whether people would see your age before they ever saw your heart. You questioned whether your best years were behind you instead of ahead of you. Those thoughts did not begin in your spirit. They arrived from voices shaped by comparison. It even steals hope. Comparison is one of the quietest thieves ever allowed near a human heart. It never kicks down the door. It politely asks to look around. Then it slowly carries away confidence. It steals expectation. It steals gratitude. Eventually. It even steals hope. You wake up believing your own life has somehow become less valuable simply because someone else's timeline looks different. But I ask you this. Who taught flowers they all must bloom on the same morning? Who instructed rivers they all must reach the sea together? Who decided every sunrise had to resemble yesterday's? Not heaven. Humanity invented those measurements. Heaven never agreed. Your story has never been late. It has simply refused to imitate another person's chapter. There are moments coming that could never have happened 5 years ago. Not because I lacked power then. Because you lacked the healing. You wanted companionship. I first had to teach you identity. You wanted celebration. I first had to teach you endurance. You wanted immediate answers. I first had to teach you trust. Would you have understood this message years ago? Perhaps. Would you have believed it? Perhaps not. Now. Something inside you has changed. Pain has deepened your listening. Disappointment has softened your pride. Loneliness has expanded your compassion. The very seasons you resented became classrooms your future love desperately needed you to attend. Your soulmate knows none of those details. Yet somehow, their heart recognizes the person those seasons created. That is why they cried. Not because you have grown older. Because they have fallen in love with the soul your journey shaped. If only you could have heard them. They weren't counting wrinkles. They weren't calculating years. They were grieving moments they wished had already been shared. They imagined ordinary mornings. Coffee growing cold because conversation lasted too long. Walking beside you with nowhere urgent to be. Laughing over stories neither of you had heard before. Watching sunsets that suddenly felt shorter because happiness makes time move differently. Simple things. Sacred things. Things impossible to replace. Their tears came from love imagining lost memories. Not from love measuring your age. My child. There is a dangerous misunderstanding growing inside your generation. People think love begins when two people finally meet. But many loves begin long before introductions. Long before names. Long before eye contact. Sometimes two hearts are prepared separately while heaven quietly teaches each one how to recognize the other. Sometimes longing itself becomes part of the introduction. Every disappointment whispers. Not this one. Every false beginning gently redirects. Every closed door quietly protects. You called them failures. One day, you will call them directions. There is something I must reveal carefully. Not because I wish to hide it. Because your heart must be ready to carry it. Last night, after the tears slowed, your soulmate did something unexpected. They stopped asking questions. They became completely silent. Not the silence of giving up. The silence of surrender. That silence reached farther than words ever could. Sometimes surrender speaks louder in heaven than thousands of prayers. The room felt ordinary. Nothing supernatural appeared before their eyes. No brilliant light. No thunder. No visible angel. Yet peace slowly entered. Not complete peace. Just enough. Enough to breathe again. Enough to keep believing one more day. Enough to whisper. If they are still waiting too, please protect their heart. Did you hear that? Read it again inside your spirit. They did not ask for riches. They did not ask for status. They did not ask that you become perfect. They asked for your heart to remain protected. Because they know how cruel loneliness can become. They know what repeated disappointment does to hope. They know the temptation to settle. To choose attention instead of genuine love. To accept almost instead of forever. To silence longing by pretending it no longer exists. But heaven has watched every moment you refused counterfeit affection. Every time you walked away from what looked easier but felt wrong. You thought nobody noticed. I noticed. Every lonely decision built invisible strength. Every painful goodbye protected a future hello. You still wonder whether those sacrifices mattered. You will not always wonder. There is a day approaching when pieces currently scattered across your life will begin fitting together with breathtaking precision. At first, you will mistake it for coincidence. Then timing. Then luck. Only later will you understand. It was orchestration. My beloved child. You often ask why I remain silent during your hardest seasons. Yet silence has never meant absence. Seeds grow in silence. Hearts heal in silence. Character forms in silence. The stars themselves spend daylight hidden behind brightness. Not everything unseen is gone. Many of my greatest works happen where impatient eyes cannot observe them. While you questioned your future, I was arranging conversations. While you feared your age, I was maturing hearts. While you counted birthdays, I was aligning destinies. Can you imagine judging a book after reading only one page? Yet you have nearly judged your own life that way. Do not let temporary chapters convince you they are permanent endings. Your soulmate nearly made that mistake too. There was one fragile moment. One terrifying moment. When they almost convinced themselves that perhaps you had already found someone else. That perhaps they had waited too long. That perhaps heaven had chosen another path. Their breathing became heavier. Their eyes filled again. Then something interrupted the spiral. Not a voice they could explain. Not a sign others would understand. Just one unmistakable feeling. Keep believing. They could not explain why. Neither will you always understand why hope suddenly returns after nights of despair. Sometimes hope is simply heaven refusing to let your story end where pain expected it to. Now I ask something difficult. Stop treating your age like an apology. Stop introducing yourself to your own future through the language of limitation. Every time you say, "I'm too late," your heart hears a command to stop expecting beauty. Every time you declare, "My chance has passed," your spirit quietly lowers its eyes from possibilities still walking toward you. Speak differently. Not because positive thinking controls destiny. Because truth deserves your agreement. The truth is this. You are still becoming. You are still growing. You are still deeply seen. You are still profoundly loved. And someone whose tears reached heaven last night still carries your name in places they cannot fully explain. But there is one detail. One detail they have never told another living soul. It is the reason their tears became impossible to hide. It is the reason heaven chose this moment for these words. It is the reason your heart has been strangely restless lately, even when everything around you looked ordinary. Because while they were crying, they remembered something. Not a memory from this life alone. Not merely a dream. Not something imagination invented. Something that made them suddenly whisper your name with trembling lips. And what they remembered changes everything. But that revelation cannot be uncovered until the next part. My beloved child. The moment they whispered your name, something changed in the unseen places that human eyes have never been able to measure. The room itself remained ordinary. The walls did not move. The clock continued counting each second. Outside, the night looked no different than any other night. Yet within the quiet spaces between every heartbeat, heaven recognized a moment that had been written long before either of you understood why your hearts had carried such an unexplainable ache for so many years. Your soulmate did not understand why your name suddenly rose from the deepest place within them. They had not planned to think about you. They had tried to distract themselves. They had spent hours convincing themselves to stop wondering when this waiting would finally end. Yet the harder they tried to silence the longing, the louder your presence became inside their spirit. Then they whispered something that no one else heard. What if they think I have forgotten them? Those words were not spoken because they knew where you were. They did not know what city you were in. They did not know what your day had looked like. They did not know whether you had laughed or cried, succeeded or struggled, smiled or silently questioned your worth. But somehow, deep within their heart, they sensed that you were carrying a burden you never showed anyone. My beloved child, I have watched both of your stories unfold from opposite sides of the same promise. There were days when you laughed while they cried. There were nights when they found hope while you almost gave up. There were seasons when you felt strong while they felt completely broken. You believed your journeys were separate. Heaven knew they were quietly preparing to become one. This is why I tell you not to judge your story by what you can currently see. A seed beneath the ground does not know another seed is growing only inches away. Roots meet long before branches do. That is how many destinies begin. You have spent years asking why certain doors closed. Your soulmate has spent years asking exactly the same question. You wondered why relationships ended. They wondered why people walked away. You questioned why promises were broken. They questioned why prayers seemed delayed. Neither of you realized those painful endings were quietly protecting the beginning that was still ahead. Last night, after the tears slowed, they reached for something they had hidden away. It was not expensive. It was not famous. It was not something the world would consider important. But to them, it carried meaning. Perhaps it was an old journal. Perhaps it was a photograph. Perhaps it was a small object that reminded them that hope once felt easier than it does now. As they held it, another question escaped their lips. Will they still recognize me when heaven finally brings us together? They were not asking whether you would know their face. They were asking something far deeper. Would you recognize the love they had protected for so long? Would you see the faithfulness hidden inside every lonely year? Would you understand why they refused to settle for something temporary when their heart kept believing in something eternal? My beloved child, there are sacrifices made in secret that only heaven records. The world celebrates what is visible. I honor what is hidden. Every time you remained kind after being hurt, I saw it. Every time your heart wanted revenge but chose peace instead, I saw it. Every time you wondered whether anyone would ever appreciate the love you carry, I saw it. And your soulmate has been making hidden sacrifices too. There were moments they almost accepted a life that looked comfortable but felt empty. There were opportunities that promised quick happiness but required them to abandon the deeper calling placed inside their heart. Again and again, something stopped them. They could not explain it. Neither can you explain why certain choices have never felt right, even when everyone around you insisted they made perfect sense. Sometimes my protection feels like disappointment before it reveals itself as mercy. You have mistaken protection for punishment. You have mistaken waiting for abandonment. You have mistaken silence for distance. Yet I have never left either of you. There is something else you must understand. Age has never frightened heaven. Only hearts that stop believing. The number attached to your birthday has never limited my ability to write miracles. Sarah laughed because she believed the impossible had already become impossible. Yet laughter turned into astonishment. Moses believed his years had already passed. Yet his greatest assignment began when others believed life should have been slowing down. History is filled with people who believed they had missed their moment until heaven reminded them that my timing has never answered to human calendars. So why have you accepted a lie that even history refuses to support? Why do you believe your best chapters must already be behind you? Who convinced you that love obeys the opinions of strangers? Not me. Not heaven. Not the one who formed your heart before time itself began. My beloved child. Your soulmate cried because they imagined you carrying these lies alone. They feared you would stop expecting them. They feared you would close your heart before destiny had the opportunity to knock. And then, something happened that neither of you remembers consciously. For the briefest moment, while both of you were awake beneath the same sky, your spirits reached toward one another through a longing too deep for language. You felt restless. They felt restless. You looked out into the night for reasons you could not explain. So did they. Neither of you knew why sleep suddenly became difficult. Neither of you understood why your heart felt unusually heavy, but heaven understood. Some connections are prepared long before they become visible. This was one of them. And then, an angel stepped closer. Not to frighten. Not to interrupt. But simply to carry a reminder that hope had not expired. Your soulmates suddenly felt peace settle over them like a gentle blanket after a storm. They wiped away their tears. They whispered one final sentence before closing their eyes. If they are hurting tonight, tell them they are worth waiting for. My beloved child. That sentence is why you are reading these words now. Because somewhere inside you, a part of your heart has quietly wondered whether anyone could ever choose you completely. The answer has been growing toward you long before you knew how to ask the question. But there is still one truth heaven has not yet revealed. One secret your soulmate discovered after that prayer. A secret connected to a promise they made years ago, without even realizing who they were making it for. And when that forgotten promise returns to the surface, everything you believed about your connection will change forever.